back into the major Supreme Court decisions coming down today and the political implications. Let's bring in our guest tonight, friend of the show, Kevin Walling, up late with us here on the Final Five. Welcome back, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So let's talk about what we saw today. These were President Biden made this campaign, or excuse me, the college loan forgiveness, sort of a centerpiece of his approach. It seems moving forward. That's out the window right now. Does he lose something in this process here?
I think, number one, the people that have those loans that are struggling to get by actually lost today at the Supreme Court. And this, you know, the Supreme Court has always been a galvanizing issue on the right, right? We remember when Donald Trump released his slate of candidates that he wanted to appoint and stuff like that. People held their nose, voted for Trump, and got their Supreme Court justices. I think that what we're seeing out of this court, whether it be Roe versus Wade last year, affirmative action, the decisions today, not just on college affordability and college debt, but also the LGBT decision is going to galvanize folks on the left to hopefully vote with an eye to the Supreme Court to fight back.
Why do you think it is, though? Because I feel we've talked about this before, because Republicans have been very good at that messaging there. So how do Democrats take that messaging and saying, look, when you vote for a senator next year, when you vote for somebody, you're not just voting for a senator, you're voting for the nominees that may come down, and especially considering the fact that we have a 51-49 Senate right now, who knows where that'll go going into 2024 and beyond.
Exactly right. We've got to bring that message home to them about, if you care about these issues, the fact that 6 Americans out of 330 million are deciding with this kind of very activist bench. It used to be the case where the Supreme Court would prioritize Congress, the executive, lawmaking, stand back and only step up when they saw something that was clearly unconstitutional. That's not the case anymore with this Supreme Court, and it is a Senate issue. Obviously, they have a say in this. Obviously, it's a presidential issue. But again, on these whole host of issues, we're seeing now that they're going to tackle more Second Amendment cases next term in terms of domestic abusers and their ability to get a firearm. This is life and decision-making by 6 Americans, and we've got to get that message out to our base, certainly.
Oh, we had a couple nights ago, Quill Robinson, who's a conservative strategist, came in.
Quill's a great guy.
He's fantastic, and we had a good conversation about the idea that some of these issues, Ron DeSantis, for one, running on this culture war issue, which plays very well for a lot of people. A lot of people who are going to vote in these primaries want to see him talk about many of these issues. The reality is, though, when you do that proverbial pivot to a general election, what do people pay attention to? These are issues that I think you're going to have a lot of voters keeping their eyes on, especially within the Democratic Party.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, Governor DeSantis this past term in Tallahassee signed a 6-week abortion ban for Florida. You can bet your bottom dollar that we're going to spend a lot of money and time talking about these abortion bans that we've seen take place now with the fall of Roe versus Wade. It's still a huge issue for a lot of Americans, especially those in the middle, right, in the suburbs, moderates, independents, that voted on that particular issue in the midterms. You can bet we're going to bring that up, obviously, in 2024.
So, look, you know, I bring you on to talk about the politics of things. I know you're not a legal strategist when it comes to things like this. However,
just play one on TV.
But, you know, something that has come up a bit, and obviously every time we had a confirmation hearing for the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, settled law, settled law, settled law. Yeah. Now we're seeing some of these rulings when it comes to, as you mentioned, equality, LGBTQ rights, whether or not somebody can deny you services based on who you marry, who you love. There are people that believe that Obergefell could be at some point brought forth, and there are many Republicans who have said that's a fantastical idea. It's not coming. Do you feel like at some point we're going to see an attorney general or some state lawmaker start the machinations to bring a challenge to the Supreme Court?
100%. We have seen nearly 500 anti-LGBT laws on that specific issue introduced in 44 states across the country. Anyone that said you know, that Roe is a settled issue, as all those justices did in those confirmation hearings, as you just pointed out, Jim, reversed themselves and either lied or perjured themselves in terms of their testimony sworn in before the United States Senate. This is a hugely problematic issue with this bench, and Clarence Thomas, in his dissent from last year on another LGBT rights issue, brought up the fact that Obergefell is not settled law in his estimation.
He mentioned that. He mentioned the right to birth control, and obviously they were hinting at some other things that could come down the pipeline. But the reality is, this is still an issue that gets Republican voters fired up, and this is why you have the court that you do. So it just goes back to saying, how do you keep that message going, and how do you keep the messaging going if we're in 2023 right now and you're still, you know, 15 months away from a lot of these voters going to the polls?
Well, I think the frustration is still going to be at play. Again, we saw it play out, 8 months or so after Roe fell with the midterms. I think people now have a longer memory about these issues, and now we're talking about politics 24/7. There is no downtime in our politics. It used to be we campaigned, starting in September. Right. Now we're always talking about these issues. People remember when their fundamental rights are taken away, whether they be African American, whether they be LGBT, whether they be a woman in this country, and we will remember in November.
There are, last thing I want to bring up, because you mentioned the affirmative action case there, and there are some people that are saying there's a double standard where you have a lot of people saying, well, it's unfortunate that you can no longer use racial preferences, but when you look at for lack of a better term, sexual preferences, that is okay for discrimination. Saying that there's a double standard there. Do you believe that there's a double standard when people look at these laws?
It's 100% a double standard, hugely problematic when they decide these cases the way that they do. And the fact that they're leaving in legacy appointments to colleges, right? If you just write a big check and send your kid to college, that's just fine. But if we want a college campus that looks like America, that's problematic. It's fundamentally wrong.
Well, what did Citizens United say? Money is free speech.
And corporations are people, supposedly.
Kevin Wallen, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jim.
Have a great 4th.
Thank you.
We're back after this on the Final Five.